So, quick question for you. Who are you? If I ask you to just hit pause right now and finish the sentence, I am, what exactly would you say? Would you list off your name? Maybe your job? A personality trait? You know, this classic psychological exercise is actually notoriously harder than it looks. It takes a surprising amount of mental energy to really define who you are.
Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going on a really fascinating journey into the mirror of the mind. Our main mission today is demystifying this huge psychological concept of the self. Because according to our source material, self and personality basically refer to the characteristic ways we define our very existence. It's how all our experiences are organized and how they actually show up in our everyday behavior. By figuring out the self, we don't just understand our own quirks, but we figure out how we relate to literally everyone around us.
To make sense of all this, here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at 4 distinct themes. 1. The duality of self. 2. The biological self. 3. The personal self. And 4. The social self. Let's get right into it.
Starting with Section 1, the duality of self.
Okay, so when you look in the mirror and think to yourself, I know who I am, you're actually describing 2 totally different things at the exact same time. First, you have the self as a subject. Think of this as the knower or the actor, the entity that actively goes out and does something. But simultaneously, there is the self as an object. This is the entity that something is done to, the consequence, the known, that gets observed and affected.
Let's break this down with a concrete example. When someone says, I am a dancer, they are describing the self as a subject. This brilliantly illustrates an entity that actively engages in the process of knowing itself through an action. You are the actor out there performing the dance.
But flip that around and look at another completely valid description. I am one who easily gets hurt. Here, this self is being described as an object. It's the entity that gets affected, a consequence of outside actions. Our source material makes a really big point of this. This dual status, being both the active knower doing the action and the observed known receiving the action, is absolutely crucial to keep in mind when we're trying to decode human behavior.
Moving right along to Section 2, the biological self.
It's crazy to think about, but a newborn baby actually has zero concept of itself. It takes time to emerge. The very first elements kick off with a pure reflex, like a newborn crying for milk when it's hungry. Over time, that basic reflex evolves into a conscious awareness. Oh, I am hungry. And boom, that is the birth of the biological self. But it doesn't just stop there. As we grow up, this biological foundation is constantly being tweaked and modified by our physical and sociocultural environment.
To really hammer this home, our source uses a super interesting analogy. The biological need for food is universal, right? But the way it actually manifests is totally modified by culture. You, based on your specific background, might suddenly get a really specific craving for a piece of chocolate. However, an Eskimo raised in a completely different sociocultural context might not feel hungry for chocolate at all, even though their baseline biological self experiences the exact same root hunger. It's wild how our environment shapes the way our biology expresses itself.
All right, Section 3, the personal self.
So, once those baseline biological needs are covered, a child's psychological and social needs start bubbling up, creating all these new, complex layers of identity. The big thing here is figuring out what makes you distinct from everyone else in the room. This is your personal identity. It's basically an orientation where you feel primarily concerned with yourself. Whenever you describe yourself using your name, a specific talent like being a singer, or your core personal beliefs, you're putting this personal self on display. It's the boundary line that separates you from the rest of the pack.
This personal self puts all of its energy into aspects of life that are strictly about the individual. We're talking personal freedom, personal responsibility, hitting your own goals, and securing your own personal comforts. When this particular self is running the show, your main focus is on optimizing your own individual lived experience.
And finally, Section 4, the social self.
Now we are doing a complete 180. We're shifting away from the individual me and diving into the deeply connected us. This is the social self. And what's really vital to grasp here is that this identity literally only exists because of our links to other people. It comes entirely from our social and cultural groups. Actually, psychologists often call this the familial or relational self. So when someone identifies mostly as a Hindu, a Muslim, a North Indian, or even just as a really dedicated member of their family, they are representing themselves through this social identity.
Heavily contrast those collective values against the personal self we were just talking about.
While the personal self was all about individual achievement and freedom, the social self is all about cooperation and unity. It prioritizes affiliation, being totally willing to make sacrifices for the group, offering support, and sharing resources. This self values social relationships way above individual comforts. And the truth is, we all carry both a personal and a social self within us, and they are constantly dancing together to shape who we are.
Which brings us to the end of this explainer, and to a question I want to leave you chewing on. When you look at the choices you made this morning, the way you interacted with your friends, or the big goals you're chasing right now, which self is driving your actions today? Is it the active subject, the social self prioritizing the group, or the personal self going after an achievement? Understanding these complex, layered identities is absolutely the first step in mastering the mirror of the mind. Thanks for joining us.